Hello everyone, I'm Leslie Maltman and welcome to Reimagining Events. This series of webinars has been developed by Tourism Northern Ireland to support the events industry as we look forward to a time in the not too distant future where we can once again get together to share the live experiences we all miss so much. We know we need to look at things in a different way and from a new perspective. And these sessions are designed to help us navigate the way ahead in the post-pandemic world. Today's webinar is entitled Reimagining Space and is being delivered by Claire Hall. After Claire's presentation, we'll come back together for a Q&A session, so please do feel free to submit any questions you might have in the chat box during the session. I first met Claire during her time managing events at the MAC, and then again in her role as manager of Culture Night Belfast. Her experience in event management and production is complemented by a career as a DJ and musician with residences in Berlin and New York, researching activism and queer performance. She joined Urban Scale Interventions in 2020. And in this presentation, she's going to take us through some of the projects she's delivered in what was clearly a challenging year, as well as some exciting placemaking initiatives and collaborations currently underway. One of Claire's favourite event memories is sharing the Six Music Festival experience at the Titanic Slipways in 2018, with so many familiar faces and in such a special place. It's no surprise then that Claire says that during lockdown, she's missed people and live performances of all kinds. I would put money on her being first back on the dance floor as soon as we're allowed. Claire, over to you.
Oh, sorry, Claire, you're just on mute.
Hello, sorry about that, classic Zoom. Thank you, Leslie, for that lovely introduction, and thank you to Tourism and I for inviting me to speak at the seminar today. I think I would agree with Leslie. I certainly will be one of the first out on the dance floor the second we can get out there. And I think I agree with everyone. We've really missed being in the world of events, particularly when you work in it. It's such a vibrant and fast-paced world that you get to meet so many different kinds of people and work in different spaces. So I can't wait till we can get back out there again. So today's seminar that I've been asked to talk about is about reimagining space, which I think leads us nicely to how Leslie introduced me. So today what I'm going to cover is, well, reimagining space and what that looks like to me from my perspective and how I view that. And I'll talk about that a little and some of the things I think we need to consider when we're using space and the types of spaces that we have. But and look at that through the lens of two case studies of the Disappearing Wall, which is a project I completed with Urban Scale Interventions in November 2020. And then Banana Block and Spinning Memories, which is an upcoming project in a meanwhile space in Portview Trade Centre, a very unusual space that I'll be opening this venue in. So I think these are two good examples. I like to talk really from experience, and I think that's the best way to start the conversation and to look at collaboration. So I think these are two good examples. So I'll just tell you a little bit about who we are. Urban Scale Interventions, as Leslie said, I've had quite a varied past. Particularly, I've been working in Belfast for the last 13 years in events management, as producing events for festivals, producing creative work, working as a DJ, and performing. So, but they all kind of come together under this live performance and live event umbrella. So I've come along to Urban Scale Interventions, which I actually started in July 2020, having been furloughed from my job in Culture Night. I was really fortunate that an opportunity came up within a studio because we weren't really sure what the landscape was looking like at that point. So this is urban scale interventions have been based in Belfast. Started off in Derry, but based in Belfast now since 2018. And who are we? We're a studio. We're a really broad studio. We're a studio of researchers, architects, designers, strategists, producers like myself, technologists, and makers. We're deliberately a multidisciplinary studio because of the types of projects that we work on. The way we talk about ourselves is we tackle challenges in the places that we work, live, and play. And we're particularly focused on placemaking through creative engagement and impactful design. But we also work where I would come from in live delivery of works, but we also work on strategy and delivery for governments, for organizations to look at how what they're doing serves the people in the place that they are working with. So, from reframing high streets to new models of education, to playful interventions, to regenerative tourism or improved community well-being, we like to cut through the red tape as much as we can, see the bigger picture and challenge the status quo. So I've been very fortunate in the middle of a pandemic to come into such a wonderful studio space. One of the things that did actually bring me to urban scale interventions and caught my attention last summer was, of course, this idea of people, place, and purpose that all intersect. But there was a really great piece of work that I wasn't involved in called The Road to Reinvention. So this was, I say it like a census, but it was a survey and people-centered response to look at recovery and how this could influence policy and strategy at government levels and local council levels, but also just to get an idea of how people were living in the cities, how people were living in Northern Ireland, and what this pandemic at this time had meant to them. So we carried this out during the first national lockdown in March 2020, and it was a survey conducted across all of Northern Ireland to understand how people's perceptions and behaviours had changed. So the results were then presented through an interactive web platform with key insights in particular, which I think we'll still be looking at around community spirit, about localism, the environment, mental health and well-being, and cultural activity. And how all of these things, maybe people were seeing them in a different light, or indeed interacting more in that sense. In particular, I'd say we really understood a lot about community spirit and localism and the environment and resilience. And we continue to, but particularly this stemmed from last year. So this actually led to the creation of a toolkit called Build Back Better, which looks at these themes then around cultural reinvention, hyperlocalism, acting on climate, reframing social issues, and focusing on well-being. So in the, I've put a link here, you can see it on the screen. It's actually called Urban Scale Reinvention. Our website is Urban Scale Interventions, but this is Reinvention. And you can see the full results of the survey, and you can still participate in it there. But it provides also a toolkit and scenario planning. So it was really, really well received, and it's being used actually across Europe. In Copenhagen is one place that they've really responded to this. So I've put that in our materials of things that we can, in the checklist that's been sent out to you as one of the links. So that's a bit about urban scale interventions, and we'll come to this idea of reimagining space. So for me, space, we're looking at indoor, outdoor, traditional venues, unconventional venues, hybrid venues, and now we live completely under this big shadow of COVID. I've worked in all different kinds of venues. So in terms of traditional venues, I spent 5 years working in the MAC, working to sell the space and for the private events here in the MAC, but also looking at how we use that in conjunction with the traditional form of what the MAC was, which was a theatre space and a gallery space, as well as a conference space, as well as a private event space. So there was so much happening. So that's a traditional venue with all the infrastructure in place, but even that presents challenges. Indoor, outdoor and unconventional and hybrid spaces. I suppose hybrid would fit in with what I was doing at the Mac. But my experience is looking particularly at culture now, looking at how you use the city as your venue. So all of these outdoor spaces and parks. And again, how do you create a venue when you just have a big concrete square like Writers Square or like Cathedral Gardens? So this is how I look at space anyway. In any case, everything that we're doing right now with considerations that I think I would straight up think about are licenses and permissions, and that's for your indoor, traditional or outdoor spaces, and that's under entertainment licensing, building control in some senses, just permissions to sell alcohol, permissions to have markets. So there's so many things within that to consider. Accessibility, which is a really big one that I really love thinking about, and that's thinking about who's coming and all your different kinds of customers or visitors and all the different abilities that they would have. So that's from ability to sensory to, yeah, I think that encompasses everything. I like to think about travel as well. How are people getting to this space, which also encompasses and includes those with access needs. You know, how are people getting to the space? How are they parking at the space? Is there bike parking? Is there adequate bus services? Things like that. Partnerships for me in any type of events or venues that we're trying to run is key, and that's from our financial partnerships, from those who are supporting us just in the cause that we're promoting, or even those who are actually helping us to deliver the event through our production team. So partnerships are absolutely key and the right partnerships that I think link to the space that you're using is important. I put the 10 down here, which I think I've linked this back into our checklist. I think your customer journey is something to really think about. Who's coming into your space? How are they going to walk around it? And as we all know from working in events, I would say there's a lot of people on this call who have so much experience with this. Once the public walk into your space, it's a whole different story sometimes to what you might have thought. But I'm thinking about this also really within the umbrella of COVID as well. Our customer journeys are going to look completely different for quite some time now, so that's very, very key for me right now. Our booking systems, how are people booking in advance? That's, I think, again, under COVID, a great way to be managing expectations of people who are coming, but also managing our numbers and then being able to manage our offering as well. Signage is something, regardless of whether we're in COVID or not. I learned this at Culture Night, that clear wayfinding and signage is absolutely key to managing the people who are coming to your event. Health and safety, ultimate consideration. So that's our risk assessments, and again, paramount during COVID. And I'll come to that through the disappearing wall example. I think clear, good marketing and customer relationship management systems are key in order to manage our customer and visitor communications and expectations. And I suppose I touched on this under partnerships, but who is delivering this and who is our team, and are they the right people? So my starting points for everything are the who, the why, and the what. That doesn't always make me popular amongst those who have the really high concepts and the huge, big ideas. But that's, I think, you can work with the big ideas, and it's really, really important to have those people in your team and be absolutely ambitious when you're thinking about reimagining space. But I like to think of, well, okay, how do we make this a reality, and how do we link in with this checklist? So the who, the whys, and the whats are really important. So for me, the who's are who's coming on board with us, who are our delivery partners, you know, who are our sponsors, who do we need to get on board to make this event happen, and who's coming. So it's our clients or our visitors. I always ask why. And I don't think I used to ask why, because I used to, just as an artist, just make and do. But now that I'm in this position of a real public facing role in any type of space that I use, I think, well, why are we doing this? Why would I put a big stage in the middle of Cathedral Gardens? What's the intention of that? And you know, how's that going to add value to my event? So why am I doing anything? And then the what needs to happen in order to get the doors open and to run safely? What is it that we're actually delivering, and what do we need to get in place before we do all that? So all of these things for me, it's a broad framework, but then I link into my deeper checklist. And again, I think that's quite a high level checklist that I've put there on the right hand side, but I think it's where I'm getting to. And I think when we get Leslie to our conversation, we can delve into these a bit deeper. So I'm going to come through a couple of, as I said, 2 case studies, which I think is a much better starting point for me to illustrate some of those points of how I get to that. So the disappearing wall. I would say I've put a link to it again, and a link to the documentary that we made about it, which was delivered last year during COVID. Delivered in November last year. Now, I will say that for those of you who weren't aware of it, the disappearing wall was a huge European-wide project. It was commissioned by the Goethe Institute, who are a big, they're a German institute, but they have offices all over Europe and in London and in Dublin. And they exist primarily to promote German language and German culture. So they're a brilliant partner for us, but they had this project called the Disappearing Wall, which was commissioned to celebrate German's EU Council presidency last year. So in short, this was a big wall that was 4 meters by 2 meters, 4 meters long by 2 meters high. It's made out of timber frame and plexiglass and housed 6,000 individually laser etched blocks. The idea was that visitors could come to the wall. They took a block. The blocks also had quotes that represented European high pop culture, and they were basically in languages from all across Europe. But the constant was on it etched in these bricks. It was etched in German, and then in the source language, and then in, say, English as well. The idea was that visitors could come to the wall. They could take a block out. As the blocks were taken away, the wall would disappear because it was made out of this clear glass. So it was about breaking down breaking down literally walls, but also breaking down language barriers and cultural barriers because everybody could approach this. So it was a beautiful idea. This was actually meant to be initially installed during Culture Night. We were, I will say, one of only 16 cities across the whole of Europe that was awarded this, and Belfast was the only UK city. So it was a really big coup to get this. But this wall, as you can see here, it was all about people approaching it and touching it. So we were meant to install it during Culture Night. It came across my doors when I was Culture Night manager. We were going to install it in the city centre. Over the course of 2 days, that was it. That's how normally this would have been installed. These are some quick stats that I'll come back to, but really what happened was we installed it on the Titanic slipways between the 21st of October and the 6th of November. The original installation, as I said, was meant to happen for 2 days in September, and this was how it'd been running with all the other projects across Europe. Then we had to switch that, and we decided that we would actually install it on a rooftop car park on the top of Castle Court Shopping Centre, and it was meant to be running from the 1st to the 12th of October. Again, a longer period than any of the others, just due to the fact that we were going to have to restrict the numbers coming. We're running a rooftop festival and a rooftop initiative as part of something else that I'm doing in urban scale interventions. So we thought that we were planning to run that across the city in October on several rooftop locations. However, in the middle of everything, Castle Court lockdown restrictions started to come into force again in October, and they were really worried about people coming. Even though it was outdoors and we thought about how we were going to manage it, we had to cancel it. So we cancelled it. It ended up being cancelled a couple of weeks before we were meant to install it. So we were forced to find another location and respond to the health and safety requirements that were coming in. So I'll talk about this. This is the wall. This is all of us. But you can see it's not a huge space, but it's all about encouraging people to come down to the space and touch it. my heart was in my mouth. I will be completely honest with you. I thought, why are we going ahead with this? Like, it just seems absolutely insane. And I was kind of scared about it, but we had to go ahead with it. So we had to think about, well, okay, where else can we put this that it's a wide open space? People don't have to go through a shopping centre to get there. And how are we going to manage it? So this is kind of what I want to talk about reimagining space with this example. So we were granted permission to use the Titanic slipways. As most of you probably know, this was once the site that launched the infamous Titanic and her sister ship, the Olympic, into Belfast Lough. So it just sits looking right out to sea. It's so majestic there. But today, it's this Titanic slipways, and that's where I was saying, Leslie mentioned that was where we'd seen the Six Music Festival, and it was wonderful. The Titanic slipways have become now a public park and a memorial garden. And so it's bookended, it sits within the Maritime Mile. It's bookended with the majestic Titanic Belfast Museum at one end and the Great Light, which is a former lighthouse lantern, at the other. So it's huge. It's wide open space, lots of beautiful scenery, and really popular with joggers, families, walkers, cyclists. And it became really popular over lockdown. So we thought, okay, let's go for it. But I still needed to think about this. So I had to apply through Titanic to get permission and a license to use the slipways. There wasn't any fees involved, but there was certain requirements that I had to fulfill. So even though it was going to be outdoors, it was a plus, of course, but I had to conduct a really in-depth risk assessment and provide that as evidence to Titanic Foundation, as they were at the time, before they would let us use it. There's a couple of other factors then that I began to take into consideration that link in with how my checklist would work. This was going to be outdoors on a really quite exposed area of Belfast, and it was going to be there for quite a long period of time, which the original designs, when this had been designed by an architect and an artist called Werner Sobek and Marina Jablonina, sorry. They had just come up with this idea as an art installation that was going to be there for 2 days. This was going to be there longer. So I needed to think about signage that would be attached to the actual sculpture so that they wouldn't be stolen or blow over. But I also felt, as you can see, that it was really, really important to have our health and safety information on one side and information about the actual project on the other. So I opted for these aluminium printed signage that was double-sided, so it meant that anybody approaching the sculpture from any side could see the information. So it was good. I thought in terms of track and trace, we put a QR code, which you can probably see in the bottom right-hand corner there. This was for track and trace, and it wasn't a guarantee, but I thought it wasn't that everybody had to use it, but it was actually really well used, and it meant that we were able to see how many people were approaching the wall, but visited the wall, but we're also able to capture data on our visitors. I also then attached 4 hand sanitizing units to the wall as well, which you can see here. So they're on either side. I have to say, these managed to last about a week and a half, which I was really pleased with before somebody stole them. So, but again, thinking about this was going to be mostly an unmanned installation. I wasn't going to be there like at every inch and second of the day. So I had to think about how these things were going to be always there so the safety of people was considered. So thinking about that then, so I'm saying with our durable signage, our hand sanitizing units, but I also then went back to my checklist of like thinking about the different kinds of visitors. So there was a couple of things that I had to do. I made some approved modifications to it and got a wheelchair ramp designed and installed at one side. This meant then that it was accessible and it was a good angle so people could get up and down it. But it also meant that those who had prams and families, it was a bit easier for them to get onto the ramp. So this was really, really well received, and I felt like this was a really important modification to make. Also, because again, this was being installed in Northern Ireland in November right on the edge of Belfast Lough. The original like finish, which was it's just wood, it's timber, but it was finished with boat varnish. So when it rained, it was so slippy. I did like a little, got my godchildren to run across it when it was raining and they nearly slipped. So I thought, okay, what are we going to do? So I had to then think about adding this non-slip black mat to the base. So taking into consideration, back to my checklist, a lot of those different things to think about of how this is going to be user friendly. So the wall then, as I said, like it worked out really well, and I have to say, even when people were queuing, it was actually one of the most visited things. I couldn't actually believe that this had worked so well during lockdown. I think so. It was installed. This basically it was filled with it can hold 6,000 blocks, but we had ordered 12,000 blocks. 11,400 blocks disappeared within 1 week. I had to refill it twice. We had over 10,000 visitors to the wall. We tracked our footfall counters, and this was between the 22nd of October and the 26th of October. I was using the footfall counters down on the slipways, so you can see the amount of people that came. Yeah, so it was restocked by the 26th, and then basically all disappeared again by the Tuesday. It was incredible. We also had a really great following on Facebook for those who couldn't attend. So thinking about going back to those like virtual and hybrid events that we talked about in the session last week, I think with Chris and the Science Festival, we were able to engage with so many people across Facebook, and we sent out 600 blocks to those who couldn't attend in person. And it was brilliant. It was so such a big response. So it was so positive, and I think reimagining this, as I said, I would have been so inclined to say no and not make this happen, but I'm glad that we started to reimagine this and the space that we were in with this. And it really highlighted how public art can play a real vital role in engaging communities, because everybody wanted to join in and talk about it and share their blocks on Instagram. And but I think if you watch the documentary that I linked to in our in my little checklist, my follow-up checklist, people were just really glad to have something to do, and I think that is so valuable when thinking about what we're offering as events producers. And I just yeah, it really, like, there was such a positive value. The fact that it was accessible to all and engaged the public both online and physically. And it was brilliant. It really, that was demonstrated through loads of collective experiences, as I say, online and through storytelling. So that was my disappearing wall. I'm just checking time here, Leslie, just keep me right if we're okay. So this is the second case study I'm going to go on to is Banana Block. And this is an upcoming venue, multi-hybrid space that I'm opening in July. And again, I'm talking about opening a venue in July. It seems absolutely insane, but we're going for it. So Banana Block is a meanwhile space that we are working on at Portview Trade Centre. So Urban Scale Interventions, we're based there, it's where our offices are, but we've been working on the overall master plan of the redevelopment of Portview. Portview, for those of you who aren't aware, is a former spinning mill on the Lower Newtownards Road in East Belfast, and it's been operating as a small kind of, like a home for SMEs since the early 1980s, but it hasn't really been developed beyond the lower floors, and it is the most incredible site. Some of you might have been to it. Well, you might have been to businesses there, but Boundary, if you're partial to craft beer, they have their tap rooms and their brewery there. So Banana Block is one of the first installations that we're working on here as Urban Scale Interventions. So it's a partnership with National Museums Northern Ireland, Urban Scale Interventions, and Portview Trade Centre. Just quickly, thinking again about some of those wider themes that we're looking at with Tourism and I. Oh, I will actually say Tourism and I are a big funder of Banana Block. I'm sorry, that hasn't been put in that slide. That'll be me out. But yeah, Tourism and I are big funders in this, and I guess what we're looking at is how we're reframing heritage, how we're reframing our offerings, our tourism offerings. We're looking at local tourism, neighbourhood tourism, as well as bringing people in from afar. So we ended up, this is just a quick overview, because I am conscious of time, on what Portview is kind of being reframed around. So this is actually Block C where I'll be working with Banana Block, but we're looking around themes of heritage. So how are we reframing heritage for modern audiences? And what we're going to do is with Banana Block partnership with National Museums Northern Ireland is look at what a museum is and reframe the space of a museum, and we're looking at the context of a living museum. We're also going to, Portview overall is going to be looking at employment and creating more opportunities for people to set up their businesses within Portview. Big thing that we're looking at is tourism. So looking at overall through Portview, the creation of an authentic destination. So why would you want, like, the idea that you're creating something for the people that live in Belfast and Northern Ireland and they want to go to it, and that makes other people want to come to this, rather than we're creating something to bring people in from outside, and Northern Irish people have to get on board with it. So that's something that's really, really integral to what we're doing. Resilience, again, looking at how we're interacting and tackling our where we're sitting right now with climate change, and that can be through, hopefully eventually, a rooftop garden, and through our urban farm that I'm going to talk about, and local growers. And then training. Eventually, we're looking at how we can bring industry back into Portview. It was one of the biggest employers for East Belfast in the early 1900s, both through just labour skills, but also development and apprenticeships and training skills. So we're looking at reframing all of these things that existed in this site to bring them into present day. So I have really ran through that very fast, but that's our sort of 5 pillars that we're working on across the whole of Portview. So it feeds into where we are now. So Block C, Banana Block. Well, this is what it will be. So this is one of the back buildings of Portview. You can see in this diagram here, this circled bit. In fact, that we're using this whole back bit. So this is just some interiors. It's tucked away from the main entrance of Portview. So looking at that, I think when I first was brought in here and I was told we're going to build a museum, we're going to build a venue, we're going to have a big weekend offering here, and this is going to be amazing. I thought, it is. How, who, what, why, and how are we going to do this? But we've come into this idea of regrowing the Banana Block. So just quickly, it's called Banana Block because as we started the research into the mill, we met a wonderful woman called Ali Nicol who created, she's a local historian, but she'd done a lot of research into the mill and East Belfast. And she discovered that the man who built the mill was Otto Jaffe. He had lived in Sydenham, and it's not there anymore, but it was a beautiful estate on the Hollywood Road called Kineater. And he had lots of Victorian hothouses. Her great-great-grandfather was William Richardson, and he was his head gardener. And he was one of the first people in the British Isles to grow ripe bananas. So that's one story, and we thought, oh, that's brilliant, growing bananas, this is cool. Then as we started to do a bit more research, Ali uncovered that the city's mills, when they went on strike in 1932, both Catholic and Protestant workers settled on one song, and it was Louis Prima's Yes, We Have No Bananas, which I was going to play, but I don't know how to get it on now, so I can just sing it to you. It just goes, yes, we have no bananas, we have no bananas today. And this is going to be a theme throughout everything I do now. So look, we thought this was kind of interesting, and 109 years later, Portview, having successfully won some Heritage Lottery grants, which will help us develop, as I said, the small and medium enterprise base. It puts neighbourhood tourism at the heart of the development of Portview as a major tourism destination. So in partnership with National Museums Northern Ireland, we're looking at how to take this narrative of the banana and build it into a museum. It'll really, yeah, how do we take that narrative and create something that is like an exhibition, but also is living. So we're looking at the living museum. So here's where we get to. This is banana blocks. So what we're going to do is grow bananas. Now, the thing is, we're going to have a banana ring right in the center of this beautiful block. And we're going to grow bananas. We're going to talk about the history of bananas. There's a huge history and connection to Belfast, but we're looking at how this links to today, right? So we're not going to have bananas. To be quite honest, we're going to have these beautiful banana trees that are not going to fruit bananas. So we're looking around this concept of Louis Prima's, we have no bananas, but they're just the beginning, right? They're the way to get you in, and this is what we're going to do. So the space, so this is reimagining space. This is going to be, we're going to be growing bananas. We're also going to have an urban farm on site. We have mushroom growers, the hardy growers, who are based in Portview, and they are going to come on board with us and start building upon their oyster mushroom farm. We've got Mash Direct on board and other partners who are going to help us to create a farm and grow and help develop and cultivate skills within East Belfast for that. But Banana Block is also going to be a space that you can come, a tenant cafe within Portview where you can have coffee, you can have lunch. And we're also going to develop the space into, there'll be record stores, there'll be hairdressers, there'll be podcast rooms. It's a multi-purpose space built around this concept of the bananas. We've also got a banana beer that we have now worked with Boundary on site to produce. So this is an artist impression. We're going to have these lovely big, this urban farm, but these are the mushrooms at the very bottom right hand side. So they're going to be based in there. They're going to be teaching, growing. So it's very exciting. But and this is our history. So we're kind of mocking up how it's going to look in the walls and how you're going to learn about this and learn about what we're doing here. So the concept of a living museum is, yeah, we're taking something that happened in the past, but we're actually evolving and growing within the space. This is a 3-year project, and we'll see how we go beyond that. But things that I am now having to consider, if I'm looking at this as a performance venue, a food venue, a market venue, a living museum, a fully programmed space with tenants in the middle of COVID, wow, what am I doing? So these are some case studies that I've looked at from particular places that were interesting to me when I lived in New York, about using outdoor space, which I think is a particular space that I'm going to have to look at going forward into the summer. But maybe from a real practical point of view, I'm really having to think about what's happening in this space and how I'm moving people. So I suppose I've been thinking a lot about my wayfinding. You know, that is tucked away on, as I said, behind Portview. So we're looking at putting little wayfinding, like these little bananas and street art that catches your eye from the street that indicates where you need to go to. One thing I do need to consider, I'm just thinking as we're looking at this, the majority of the majority of Portview's cobbled. So now I'm considering how those with access needs would go across that. I know, for example, I couldn't push my mother across something like that because she'd have an absolute fit of pain. So I'm thinking about, again, who's coming in and how am I doing that? I'm going a little off script because things are coming into my head as I'm looking at them because this is such a live project that I'm working on. But say my main space, so we'll have a huge outdoor space, which I've kind of cut off from this. This is like the indoor cutaway right now. But if you look at my arrows, I'm trying right now to think about how I run a museum experience that and a cafe experience, but thinking about my one-way system. So where the blue arrow starts at the very left-hand corner here, thinking follow the arrows around how I would run any kind of engagement groups or skill groups, or how people would walk around the space to an in and an out. And that's a daytime situation that I'm thinking about. I'm also then thinking about this green line is thinking about if I run this as a venue at nighttime with a full outdoor space. we need portaloos, we'll need smoking areas. I need to consider where the smoking areas are in relation to the rest of the building. So I have to reconfigure where the entrances are. So if you can see on that, the entrance will be at the bottom right-hand side, and there'll be, I haven't done all my arrows yet, but I'm now trying to think of how I do a one-way space. I've got a bar that you can get access from both sides, but there'll be one way in, one way out. And I'm going to have to manage that with COVID. Eventually, this will be an all singing, all dancing, hopefully 1,000-person capacity venue, but it's definitely going to be a lot more restricted in the beginning parts. Leslie, what I might do actually is it might be easier to have a chat about Banana Block and ask me some questions around the checklist, because there's a lot that's coming into my mind here that you might be thinking about, and it might be easier to talk about it that way if you're happy.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I've got loads of questions.
Wonderful.
I suppose a lot of the questions are about, they overlap everything you've talked about. I mean, I think the disappear wall thing is just amazing, and it's great that there was an appetite for people to come out to that. One of the things that surprises me that we talked about in the risk, reimagining risk webinar, was about compliance.
Yeah.
And about, and it feels to me like with the disappear wall, people were actually really compliant, respectful, didn't take the proverbial, didn't run off with all the bricks.
Well,
There was, so you didn't have to man it. You didn't get a situation. You weren't in the front page of Belfast Live with crowds, no social distancing, blah blah blah.
no.
And did that surprise you? Because I have to say, it surprises me a bit.
It really surprised me. And to be honest, it's like actually when we were running culture night and sitting in blue light meetings and realizing that you had to make sure you talk to the fire service, the traffic management, the police service, all these things. I was scared I was going to be on the front of the Telegraph, Belfast Live, or worse, be in jail for something happening. But I was surprised, and I was surprised because it was so popular. Like, I have to say, the Facebook group at times actually was a bit like Mumsnet, because people were actually really upset that people were taking 3 or 4 blocks and then telling, and other people were doing that. But in most cases, people followed that signage that said 2 people at a time to each side, hand sanitize, take a block, and then leave, or step back for someone else. And I have to say, in most cases, people did. I will say, I think people were just really happy to have something to do, and people were still really COVID aware, and still are. Like, yeah, I think by sort of October, November, we were midway through where people were just starting to, that's how things are. So everyone was quite compliant. I did have security overnight, just when we talked about it with the Titanic Slipways, the Titanic Foundation and Titanic Quarter Limited. We felt like just at night time it might be better to have overnight security. So that was an additional cost I didn't actually talk about, but I got that factored in through my funders. But that was maybe an unforeseen thing, that had we been just putting it somewhere for 2 days, like during culture night or something, that all would have been, encompassed. But no, I didn't need to be standing there herding people, which I thought was brilliant.
I think one of the things that, and again, it's funny because there's a lot of overlap with your presentation and what we've talked about, not just in the risk one, but in the storytelling one, and then in the one you talked about where Chris and Sarah from the Science Festival talked, the hybrid and virtual one. And you mentioned there about the additional cost of the student, and I think one of the things we talked about at the risk one was that we're all going to have to think about our events and how we execute them in a different way, and that inevitably is going to lead to some additional costs, and one of those might be security. And it makes me think about, like, when we first started working together on Culture Night, and there was this whole thing about how culture night just happens on the streets, and the streets are just taken over, and it's like one massive big pop-up, when actually we know that's not the reality of it. But there are events like Festival of Fools, for example, where a performance is put on and people just turn up to it. But that, no matter who you are, that you're not going to be able to do that anymore. You're going to have to think about how you control the amount of people that stop to watch something. You're going to have to think about, so if it's a crowd like that and you've got somebody in a wheelchair, for example, or you've got kids, you can't be pushing them through. How do you part a crowd when there's social distancing in place? If you were putting something on in, something like, I think Festival of Fools is quite a good example, in somewhere like Signage Square, traditionally you wouldn't be hiring in portaloos or, baby changing, because you've got the Mac next door, as an example. But, we might not be able to, we don't know what way the Mac, for example, is going to operate. It might be a one in, one out. There might be a restriction on who can use their toilets. So those things inevitably are all going to have a cost associated with it. But I think it's really important that people go into it with their eyes open, and that they realise, we have to do this. This is just the way the way the new world is.
It's the way the new world is, and one, yes, but I also think maybe our eyes should have been open anyway to a lot of those things about crowding and about how we're managing those with access needs, not just like mobility, like wheelchair users, those with different like ASD or like on the autistic spectrum disorders, people who are deaf, people who are blind. Like there's a lot of stuff we didn't think about. Well, we did. We tried to consider a lot of these things for Culture Night the year that we did it, for sure. But I think maybe these are things that we just didn't. It's just quite easy to. Sorry, I've kind of gone off.
I personally don't think that people. I know when you work on something that's of that kind of performance nature, people love the fact that it looks like it's just popped up. But actually, I don't think people care if you put a few pedestrian barriers in place. Particularly now, I mean, I think people will come out and stand under rain, hail, or snow to watch something. I don't think they care if they have to wait, or they will care if they have to wait to be counted in, or what. I think people now will just be so grateful that it's not going to be a barrier to anybody coming and joining in your event experience.
No, and it's just how you're managing it and responding. And I think a key thing is, like I would say, there's quite a few people on this call who I know, like from the Mac here as well, like having to really rethink your customer journey, having to really rethink what your offering is and how you're getting people in and out, and responding to changes that are happening like all the time. And I think that's just it. And I think people are okay with that as long as you can signpost them in the right way.
Yeah, I think that's really key what you said earlier, because a lot of the time, I feel like no matter what your audience is, whether it's families, whether it's, I don't know, young people, whatever it is, I feel like that whole signposting in human form or in actual signage is so important. It's more important than we think it is. You really want to be looking up. Everywhere you look, you can see where do I go? If I go that way, where does the experience take me? I think that is more important than we've probably given it credit.
I think people really value it. Like one of the big kind of when we were reevaluating Culture Night last year, was a criticism had come back that it was quite hard to find where you are. So we had created all these zones, do you remember, in different areas, but actually there's nothing really physically on the street that says you've now come into zone 7, or you're now, toilets are this way or taxis are this way. And it seems like quite obvious now, but I suppose at the time you're managing so many different things, you just don't realize that. I always say, and I have to, it's something I'm trying to live by myself, because I am such a I'm so easily like kind of inspired by so many things, that structure allows for spontaneity. And I think people are happy when there's a bit of structure. It doesn't mean it's a total like fascist regime. It just means people like to know what they're getting. And then you can interpret whatever way you want, or you can go off in this direction. But I think it's really important. And that's your job. Like as the event organizer, your job is to keep everybody safe and to provide the best experience possible. So you have to think about those things. It's key, actually. And there's so much that I haven't even touched on that we need to get into, but like I'm trying to think about this museum,
Well,
for example.
Yeah,
You know?
well, funny, toilets seems to be a recurrent theme within questions.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that's to do with the age demographic of the audience. Like I certainly feel as a woman of a certain age, I need to know where's the closest toilet.
Yeah.
But people are interested about the space within Portview, and just to be clear, it's ground floor.
It's ground floor. Yeah, so
It
it's
sounded we were talking like toilets were not an issue, but that they're a challenge. I mean, the toilets are going to be inbuilt, are they? To the
yeah, there'll be two inbuilt. I mean, yeah, we're having to work within. There's some change of use that we put in for this building, but we're sort of having to work with what we've got too. So there's two toilets in the reception, and then we're adding another accessible and baby changing toilet in there. And then what we're going to look at is actually probably just buying those mobile units that similar to some of the things that we had, you know, the very, very nice ones that we got in
posh
for.
one.
Yeah, there's like posh, lovely porta cabins that are nicely plumbed in and accessible. I think that's what we'll look at for outside, to be honest, and particularly again if we're having to operate outside. Yeah, that
Do
they should
you
be
mean?
accessible.
Do you mean? So are you thinking about that so that you can keep the outdoor space separate from the indoor space?
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
And I
But
mean, do
even
you not think that adds to the outdoor experience?
yeah,
Because
but I think
everything
yeah,
you're doing is self-contained.
it's what self-contained. Yeah, I think it's really key. And look, that's the stuff I'm sort of thinking about from experience now, but I'm pretty sure the second those doors open, there'll be something that we've just realized we put in the wrong place, you know, and you're like, oh, that's where people would walk to get the toilet, or that's actually where you would need that there. So I'm kind of aware that I might have to jig things about a bit. Well, I can't jig everything, but with the porta cabins, yeah, I think that allows for that.
I think one of the things, just when you're talking about jigging about, that was apparent whenever you were talking about the disappearing wall is, and actually something we talked about on the risk webinar is, if your event or experience takes place over a longer period of time, it allows you to adapt and be reactive to what's going on. Like even when you were talking about the slip mat and the ramp, and
Yeah,
whereas if you're just holding something for one day, then
yeah,
it happens and it's gone. What we did find out from listening to Stuart Turner talk at the Risk seminar was that also means that, like he was talking about the America's Cup and how in New Zealand they went through like 3 different stages of lockdown because it happened over a longer period of time. So I guess the lesson there is that if you're putting something in place for a week or a couple of weeks, that you just have to be on top of
hmm
what's happening, what the restrictions are, and hopefully going forward, the restrictions will be coming down rather than going up. But it must have been good for you to be able to say, right, well, that's not working, so let's go and
yeah.
adapt that or change that.
Yeah, and well, I have to say though, I actually foreseen all of those changes. Like I at the design stage before that was built, I got them to redesign it and put a wheelchair ramp on. Like that was a no, that was like a non-negotiable for me anyway. Um, because it was a step up, like it was a couple of inches of a big step up. So, you know, even like I always think about my mom as a disabled access user. she couldn't have like got up to the wall because she couldn't have stood out of her wheelchair or got there. So I thought that was really important. The slip mat then, I put that on the day that it was constructed, it was lashing out of the heavens. So that's where I was like, I got to see firsthand that someone could slip on that, and I thought I preempted that. I added that on rather than wait to see if anybody slipped. Do you know what I mean? One thing I did think about adaptability with that wall though was that because it emptied so fast, like I had put that in place for 2 weeks, but to be honest, it was ready to come down after a week. So once it was empty, then people started to vandalize it, and then there was some like bad activity, you know, the potential for some like kind of antisocial activity happening in the slipway. So I really, it was really like a lot of work and detail to manage that, even though that was up for a longer period of time, because you just had to really keep on top of it. So I just worked really closely with Titanic Belfast and Titanic Foundation, they're called Maritime Belfast Trust, sorry, and our Titanic Quarter Limited to really keep on top of that. And then I made a call to take it down earlier than it should have been, because it was starting to then, people were starting to feel disappointed by the fact they were coming and it was empty. Somebody actually started graffitiing all over it at the very end, and then on the last day somebody stole all the hand sanitizing gel. So
And the other thing then about that space is like it's a total wind tunnel. So you know I mean, I remember working on tall ships, and we had our food market down there, and one night there was literally stalls that hadn't been secured properly, just taken off. So you had to think about the security in terms of it being fixed and in place.
Well, actually, we had to add 4 extra like stabilizing bars at each side, because like I had already like put big steel weights. Again, I had to redesign this completely. Like I added steel weights into the bottom of it, so it was like really held down, because it was flimsy. The structure was flimsy. Architects but they don't think about the actual, I don't think that.
Well, it's not the difference between being creative and being a logistics practical event person.
Yeah, that's where I'm saying I'm not popular when I do the who, what, the who, why, what. But I'm glad I do that.
Somebody has to do that. There's a question that's come up today that has come up a couple other times just around insurance, and people are insurance is one of those things at the moment where it's a bit controversial, because people are having problems with insurance claims and cancellation and so on. And I mean, in my experience, I think that the way forward in events at the moment is to make sure that you're having an open conversation with your insurance broker in terms of these are the things that I'm concerned about. These are my expectations in terms of the number of people in any one day, the demographic of them. I think if you provide the right information to your insurance broker, then they will come back and say to you, these are the things we can insure you against, these are the things we can't insure you against. And I think once you know that, you're going into it with an open mind. And I think you have to just have that honest conversation. You can't be insured against everything. That's just not. I mean, the COVID thing is.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And actually, it's something. So with the disappearing wall side of it, this was a funded project. So, you know, it was all about, we just had to keep in touch with the people who were funding us to work out how to deliver it. Insurance, we just had our own public liability insurance. It was a slightly different thing to how you'd be dealing with like live performance, and it's something that I've just started to consider going forward now with the banana block, particularly if we have people hiring the space from us or we're running ticketed events. How are we covered? Because we're going to rely on that income to keep the space running. So yeah, I actually think I'm trying to understand that a bit better, but I think you're right, Leslie. It's about
But I think it's about, like I tell a story about, I think everybody you have to have insurance in place, and you have to have risk assessments. because at the end of the day, I had an experience years, like 20, well, maybe not 20 years ago, but where somebody who was setting up some kit fell and hurt themselves, and ultimately they put a claim in against me as the agency, my client, the venue, and their employer, and the supplier whose kit they fell over. And even though it was ultimately the largest and richest of those organisations, which was the venue that settled, we all had to go and visit our solicitors, and we all had to incur costs to do that. So we all needed adequate insurance in place. You know, so it is, whether or not the liability is going to fall with you, you still need to be able to, you still need to have the insurance in place to cover that.
Yeah, I'll just put my hands up. Like I have worked in venues and live events for a long time, but I've never, what we're doing with Banana Block is new for me to be in the setting up stages of this. So there's a lot of things, like you're saying that, and those are things that just started to come to me the other day that I would never have had to have any responsibility for. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's really valuable to have these are great conversations. I'm just saying that because those are all these things that come up all of a sudden when you've got the dream and the big ideas, and then there's these realities of how to like cover your back and deal with all those like unforeseen things. So yeah.
What's the thing that, is there one thing that you're like that takes your sleep away at night, and that when it comes to opening a venue, and is there one big thing that you feel is a challenge that you're not quite sure how to get around it, or is it just the fact that you're doing this in the middle of a pandemic? Whose idea was that?
It's the people who are the big thinkers. I'm glad for those, really. I would say I am a risk taker, okay, and I have come from a creative background for a long time, so I just used to do and make without thinking of consequences. So, and I'm really glad for those people that exist now, because I've gotten older and I'm now more concerned about things. Like, you know, that idea, it's a quote from Degas, the painter, and he says, painting is easy when you don't know how. You know, the more experience you have, kind of the more afraid of risk in certain senses, because you're like, I know what could happen. And then you're worried about the unknowns too, whereas like I think when you're just starting out, you just want to go for it and see what happens. So what I lose sleep about, there's a couple of things I do. Like, I suppose in a very practical sense of being an economic operator of a venue, and my job is to make sure the income comes in. You know, I am worried about that, because I'm worried that we're in a slightly different situation to how we would normally be, where you sell tickets and you're, you know, even when you're working in a venue, it's really hard to sometimes sell tickets and keep all that income going. But I think that's a big challenge now. And my other challenge is just making sure that I've really looked after the people who are coming into the venue, and it's a good offering and it makes sense when you walk in. There's a couple of those things, but I think I need to make sure that it's safe. Like all those things that I have in that checklist, and as I say, that's high level now that we think about it, because I've said licenses and permissions, but under that I'm thinking about all my insurances, but those are the big things, making sure that you've done everything you need to do to be compliant with building regulations, with entertainment licensing, with alcohol licensing, with to keep everybody safe in your venue, and that you're doing everything above board. That's my thing anyway.
I think maybe the very fact that you're opening it at a time where you're having to think about extra health and safety means that ultimately you're going to be in a better position, and people, you know, might almost even feel more comfortable. I mean, I think it sounds like a brilliant venue, a brilliant addition to the kind of East Belfast portfolio. You know, we've got great outdoor space at C.S. Lewis Square, and you know, and you and I have talked about other space like Conswater, you know,
Yeah.
and about how sometimes it's about thinking thinking outside the box when it comes to,
Yeah.
you know, you might have always traditionally used either an indoor venue or a particular outdoor space, but you know, now is the time to be thinking, well, where else? Oh, there's a multi-story car park, you know, or whatever it happens to be. I think it's a good time to be considering those different.
Well, it is, yeah. And like I think as I say, I'm really glad for those who are like the less risk averse, because they're thinking, it's future thinking, and it's saying the world's it's going to keep on turning. So how are we going to work with it, as opposed to saying we can't do anything? And certainly like using these outdoor spaces is going to be really interesting. And thinking about how, like, you know, like this block C, Banana Block, is a huge big space. So, you know, at social distancing, I think we can manage that, and people can still have that experience. Yeah, and like I mean, like all those partnerships are really, really important. Like, you know, I'm going to be working hopefully with Conswater as one of my rooftop venues, actually, for my rooftop festival that I'm also running in the middle of all of this. But yeah, I think you just got to be smart and like keep in touch with the guidelines and think, okay, well, a rooftop, like that rooftop car park, for example, at either Castle Court or Conswater, particularly Conswater, you can access everything from outside.
Yeah.
There's like outdoor stairs, so straight off, like no one's going to have to go inside. So you know, I just think about things like that. I'm going to think about partnering hopefully with Eastside Arts and doing something like that, where because they were great. Actually, they were great at looking at COVID last year. Do you remember they worked with Conswater and they produced like the King of East Belfast in there?
Yeah.
Smart. So
I mean, I
yeah,
think, sorry, I was just going to say, I'm conscious of time. So
yeah,
I was just going to say, kind of, you used a word there, which was the word I was going to use in summing up. That I think that whole partner, the partner thing's important, and that maybe some of the things that we could take away from today are that you shouldn't be afraid to look at different spaces and to ask, just to go and ask the person that owns that space. In the way that you did last minute with the slipways,
yeah.
can I use your space? I mean, the worst that can happen is they can say no. And I think the other really important lesson that we've learned across all these webinars is that we're really, we've got loads of big, giant ideas, but we're a small event community, and people are happy to share knowledge, share experiences. You know,
Yeah.
if you need advice, you know, pick up the phone to somebody who is running or has run a similar type of event. And you know, the more we work together like that, the more
Yeah.
successful as an industry will be.
Well, that's the only reason I could get through some of my things, was pulling upon like colleagues from other organizations and saying, look, actually, can you show me what a risk assessment looks like, please, and how I do that? And what have you put a COVID risk assessment together? Do you mind like sharing your guidelines? And you know, and I think in Belfast we are small, and it's really important to be sharing and learning from all our successes and failures. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
hopefully, so as I said, I don't see myself as an oracle on anything, but I see myself as someone who's reflective and continually learning, and really open to learning from others. So I think that's my opening point for any one-to-ones anybody would like.
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Well, we'll take it. I'm sure you'll be taken up on that one. On that note, I'm just going to wrap up. So thanks, Claire. Again, we could have talked. We could have talked even longer with a couple of gins. Fortunately, it's a bit too early in the day for that. Before we finish up, I'm just going to do a couple of live polls. So if everybody wouldn't mind just staying on for a wee minute. The first one is, how would you rate today's session in terms of content and relevance to your business. So if you could vote, it's a scale 1 to 5. 1 is not relevant at all, and 5 extremely relevant. Brilliant, thank you. And then the second and final question is, you plan to take any action within your business as a direct result of what you've heard today? That's a very simple yes or no, please. So if you wouldn't mind just voting on that, that would be great. Thanks, guys. So yeah, I hope you found today as interesting and as useful as I have. Everybody who has attended or registered for today will get an email, follow-up email, which will tell you where you can access this presentation, the actual presentation itself plus the recording online. And it will also tell you where to access the checklist that Claire alluded to earlier on. That's a really useful kind of hints and tips guide, and quite good if you want to share it with your colleagues. There are also limited one-to-one sessions with all the presenters from the webinar series. So that'll tell you how to access those as well. And then lastly, and what I always say most importantly, as someone who works in events, there is a evaluation form. It'll only take a couple of minutes to fill that in. So if you could do that, that would really help Tourism NI to shape the future kind of projects and help of this kind that they give to the industry. So finally, thanks everybody for tuning in today, for joining us. Hopefully, as I said at the end of all these, next time we do this, we get to do it face to face. And in the meantime, stay safe, everybody. Take care. Thanks very much.